Hi, I'm Dennis Gill, the host of Revealing History. World War I ushered in the age of tanks. And it was during this time that trench warfare was all the rage. It was how battles were fought, it was how battles were won and battles were lost. It seems strange to us today because of the arduous nature of that type of warfare, but that's the way it was fought back then. The introduction of the tank was designed to be the solution to the stagnation that was trench warfare. In the early days of tank development, there were some pretty strange designs, and that's okay. Not every design concept is going to make it to the battlefield. But perhaps one of the strangest designs came from a Russian engineer in 1915. In fact, this thing was so weird, it didn't really resemble what you think a tank should look like, more like a giant, massive piece of artillery. In this episode of Revealing History, we'll look at the origins and the ultimate demise of one of the strangest tank designs in military history, the Russian Tsar Tank. Let's get started. Some form of artillery has been in use during warfare ever since its invention in China 1,000 years ago. An army that could project its dominance on the battlefield through the use of artillery was far more likely to defeat its enemy. This was true during World War I, when artillery reigned supreme on both the Western and Eastern fronts. But it did have its drawbacks, mainly that it was hard to move around, especially along the Eastern Front, where the terrain was rugged and muddy and there wasn't an extensive network of roads. But if an army could achieve a high level of mobility, it would have a strategic advantage. Enter Russian engineer Nikolai Lebedenko. In 1914, Lebedenko was employed by a private company that did work for the Russian War Department, designing artillery. He, along with Nikolai Zhukovsky and his two nephews, came up with the idea for a kind of motorized artillery gun or motorized battle machine. The idea was inspired by a Turkic Pravoski cart, which featured large diameter wheels which allowed it to overcome harsh terrain features such as large bumps and ditches. The engineers thought that with large enough wheels and a big enough engine, the gun could overcome any obstacle it may encounter on the battlefield. Now, big ideas many times need somebody with deep pockets to pay for the research and development. And this was the case with Lebedenko's idea. So he built a scale model of the tank and powered it with a gramophone spring and presented it to Tsar Nicholas II in the hopes that he could convince him to finance it. After playing with the model for almost an hour and watching it run over books that were intended to represent obstacles on the battlefield, the Tsar immediately agreed to finance the project to the tune of 210,000 rubles. Lebedenko and his team got to work on building the tank prototype, which was completed in July of 1950. The tank was so massive that it had to be made in sections and then assembled at the test location, which was in a remote forest several miles away from Moscow. The most distinguishing feature of the tank was its two massive spoked wheels, which measured 9 meters or 30 feet in diameter. They were powered by two 240 horsepower Maybeth engines that were taken from Zeppelins. The third wheel was mounted to the rear and measured only 1.5 meters or 5 feet, and it was non-powered. The large wheels were intended to allow the tank to cross significant obstacles such as trenches, shell craters, trees, and structures such as houses. The huge wheels were mounted to an axle that was attached to the armored hull, which sat 8 meters or 26 feet off the ground and was 10 millimeters thick. The hull was 12 meters or 39 feet wide and was equipped with two 76.2 millimeter cannon and multiple Maxim machine guns. The whole contraption weighed 60 tons and required a crew of 10. It could achieve a speed of 10 to 12 miles per hour on a flat, hard surface. And when assembled, the tank resembled an armored tricycle. It was no doubt an impressive machine. The Tsar Tank, also known as the Lebedenko tank, or the Nitopire, was a unique and radical design, but it was fraught with issues. It was massive. Now, this might intimidate enemy troops, but it also made it a huge target for their artillery. If a shell should strike either of its front wheels, the tank would be left motionless and practically a sitting duck for further attacks. Now, given that the main design feature, the large wheels, were intended to allow the tank to remain mobile despite any obstacles it encountered, being rendered motionless on the battlefield kind of presented a big problem. The large wheels, despite being powered by two 240 horsepower engines, were underpowered due to its weight, and they were prone to getting stuck when traversing over soft ground such as might be encountered along the Eastern Front. The rear wheels, which supported a great deal of weight and were non-powered, became stuck in the mud very easily. Again, even the twin 240 horsepower engines could not overcome this engineering flaw. The tank's guns had a limited field of fire due to the massive wheels, which were mounted in front of and rose slightly higher than the guns. And as if all of that was not enough, the final nail in the coffin was the high cost of production due to the complexity of the design. During the initial testing for the Russian military in August of 1915, the tank became stuck and efforts to pull it out failed. Again, by design, it was supposed to be able to overcome any battlefield obstacle. In reality, it couldn't. It was left in place until 1923, when it was finally dismantled and scrapped. Despite its failure as a military vehicle, the Russian Tsar Tank is still a fascinating piece of engineering in military history, and it's been the subject of numerous articles, documentaries, and it even appears in a video game. You can see a full-size replica of the Tsar Tank at the T-34 Tank Museum in Moscow, Russia. And overall, it was an ambitious, yet unsuccessful attempt to create a capable mobile weapons platform. Was it the strangest tank design in history? Perhaps. Let us know what you think in the comments. What do you think was the strangest tank design in military history? If you enjoy learning about the Tsar Tank, click the screen now to hear about the top secret space shuttle mission that almost ended in disaster. And to support our work, please consider liking and subscribing. And until next time, I'm Dennis Gill for Revealing History.